new, welcome. This is a project that I came up with the great help of Ms. Linda Chapman. And basically, the germ of it was that I was trained as an actor in a very traditional way, and then I started seeing plays at places like the Workshop and the Wooster Group and the Ontological, and kind of got my mind blown apart by that, and then started working with people who work in more non-traditional methods of creating theater and working, and have really loved that, but also found that it's challenging for me as an actor the way I train. So we thought we'd create this series where young actor gets to talk to master actor and have a conversation basically about the difference if there is one, or just basically how you approach performance in various types of theatrical forms. So that's my little spiel, and just want to say thank you to Linda and Jim Nicola and Rachel Silverman, who helps me all this stuff together, and everyone here at the Workshop who has facilitated this. And without further ado, this is David Greenspan.
Well, you know, I was going to one of the things I think I'll try to communicate best is that I'm not a master actor, but I'll try to tell you a little bit about myself. And that's actually how I wanted to start. I proposed, Nick, that I talk to you for a little bit, mostly about what I've done and where I come from. And that'll hopefully tell you a little bit about what I know, and might be able to frame a discussion about, you know, what I do and what other questions might come up. So this will be, you know, extemporaneous. So if I go back and forward a little bit, you'll just you'll bear with me. So, you know, I was born and I was raised in Los Angeles, and at that time, Los Angeles wasn't really what you'd call a theatrically inclined town. At least not compared to someplace like New York or other major cities or cities in Europe. It had as you know, has a very rich history in film, from the silent era and television and stuff like that. But there was not much theater. And whatever theater there was, I wasn't really exposed to. What I really was exposed to was television. And to the kind of television you'd expect, you know, to be exposed to at that time, all of which was in black and white. And my first experience of the theater was actually on television, and that was because there was a wonderful show, a program that was broadcast every year, I think around Thanksgiving. I'm sure some of you saw it. It was Peter Pan, and it starred Mary Martin, and it was, I think, just a video of the stage show that she had done, which she'd had a tremendous success with, and it was wonderful. And Mary Martin was kind of my first love, and she still to this day is kind of really my favorite in a way, because she has this most sublime diction and intonation, and she sings and performs so directly. There's nothing fussy about her, and I always appreciated that. And my father, who was an engineer, he knew how to take the back of the television off the set, and he would twist wires around, and on his reel-to-reel tape recorder, he recorded all of Peter Pan. So I would listen to it constantly, and I knew it backwards and forwards, including some of the commercials. and then every year when it was played again, I pretty much knew it except for the picture, which, you know, I remembered, but I knew all the words. And when I got older, I did the same thing on my reel-to-reel tape recorder. I recorded The Wizard of Oz, which I only saw in black and white because we didn't have a color television, and Guys and Dolls, and Born Yesterday, and certain episodes from Star Trek that I rather liked. And I knew them all backwards and forwards. I just listened to them constantly. There was also a program that was on the radio at that time called Broadway Showtime. And my father recorded musicals off the radio. And I'm probably not unusual, either from my generation or other generations. That's also how I was exposed to the theater, was through the recordings of musicals. And they played all the great shows of that time, and even Mary Poppins, which I had seen and I liked. So I would listen to those all the time. And then when I was older, I would check out the musicals on the LPs from the library, and I recorded those onto my reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I listened to all those all the time also, and I knew them backwards and forwards. And I remembered so well the kind of vivid and charismatic voices that you would hear. And you probably know all the people, Mary Martin, Rex Harrison, Barbra Streisand, Ethel Merman, all those people. They were like portraits in a way because their voices had such an impression. And I didn't know the stories of the shows, but the score kind of told you the story, and their voices were so powerful. And then in elementary school, I went to a summer program to write a musical on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This was like a summer project. And the first song that I wrote was a song I never showed anybody. It was called People. People who like chocolate are the luckiest people in the world. I had a sense of where I was coming from. And then I wrote some other songs, and I played a small part. And then when I wrote a song for the old grandfather that goes to the Chocolate Factory with Charlie. I didn't play that then, but I played it when we redid the play in the school year. And that song that he sang is like a strip number, because I had loved You Gotta Get a Gimmick so much, and I used to dance around the apartment to that song that the old man kind of had a strip song. And then I went in high school, and that's where I would say my off and off-Broadway career kind of really began, with the Fringe Theater. Because, you know, there were the faculty shows they would direct. I had little parts in those. I played Peter in Romeo and Juliet, which I played 35 years later. It was kind of like my career trajectory. And I played a small part in The Matchmaker, which is a great play. But also, I was always in the chorus, you know. And in those days, everybody, probably the same thing. Everybody gets to be in the chorus who wants to be in the show. So I was like in the fourth row of the chorus with people that couldn't dance. And I didn't get to play Nicely Johnson, you know, in Guys and Dolls. Robbie Hamer got to do that. Any little kid. But in the student-generated productions, that's where I got to do things. And I got to sing and be funny and things like that. And in class, people were fond of the way I performed. And then when I went to college to get a drama degree, the same thing pretty much happened. In the couple of faculty productions I got into, I was like the guy that sang Loverly with Eliza or something like that. And then in the student-directed productions, I got to play some featured roles and things. I was kind of made an impression, but there were small parts. And then in student-generated things, I again got to do things, and it was quite a lot of fun. And they did Guys and Dolls again, and the same kid from high school got the part one more time. He followed me to the University of California at Irvine. He got the part again. And then we came to New York at the same time, and he lasted for 2 months. And then he turned tail and ran from to Beverly Hills and became a lawyer. So I Googled him, and now he looks like Stubby K. And then when I came to New York, pretty much the same thing happened. I did a couple of little shows off Broadway. The first one was across the street here, a place called the New York Theater Ensemble, which the building is still there. The company doesn't exist. It was a Lope de Vega play. They don't do a lot of Lope de Vega, I think, in New York, but nothing you can do about that. And then it was a little musical called The Search for Love that had animals. And I played, there were 3 sheep, good, bad, and ugly. And I played ugly. And we all wore carpet. And the good sheep was in white carpet, the bad sheep was in black carpet, and the ugly sheep was in gray carpet. So I wore gray carpet that the songwriter's mother made. And that's pretty much all I really did. And I took acting classes. And then as I became more in touch with my sexuality, I began to just write things in a journal. And there were places at that time where you could just do anything. And so I would memorize these kind of monologues that I wrote, and I would do them at these, like the Limbo Lounge, or other little places that existed. And and perform. And then there was a choreographer that I met and became very fond of, and we created theater dance pieces together, where I would write the text, and he and the parade of girlfriends that he had that I endured would dance with us. And I think I outlasted about 3 girlfriends while we continued our relationship. And then he kind of got tired of me yelling at him, so that kind of came to an end, and I went back to acting class. And then I began to write things that were more like plays. There was no more dancing. And I did these again in places like the Limbo Lounge. And then somebody who had been at the Limbo Lounge opened a small theater that some of you may remember. It was a wonderful theater called Home for Contemporary Theater and Art. It was a great little place. It was right just a couple doors down from Soho Rep. It's long gone, unfortunately. The people that ran it opened here, but that little theater, which was beautiful, is gone. And I did a number of plays there. And I then came to the attention of Joe Papp, and all these plays, 2 Samuel 11, etc., and Jack, and the home show pieces, and Principia, they culminated in a play called Dead Mother. And I did that at the Public Theater, where I was way over my head. And I directed a few pieces there too. And then when that came to an end, I had like up and down periods where I would write and when I was not writing very much. And I began ultimately to coordinate a career to the extent that I could, in which I would act in my own plays, and I would continue to act in other people's plays or in revivals of plays. Well, more often than not, small or featured roles in plays off and off Broadway. And that's pretty much what I've done throughout. And I've worked with a wide variety of writers, everyone from Richard Foreman to Terrence McNally, Mark Crowley, Kathleen Tolan, and younger artists like Sarah Rule and Adam Rapp. Elizabeth Egloff is younger than me, so I know she's younger. David Grimm, all these terrific playwrights. And that's pretty much what I've done. So I thought I would just start with that so you have some idea, where I come from.
It's better than me just reading your bio.
Oh, really? That's what you're going to do?
Yeah,
oh,
that was my
terrible.
plan. This is what I'm learning from you, gosh. So I guess just starting out to ask if you consider yourself an avant-garde performer and what you think of that term.
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question, so I thought I better look it up online. So, this raises an important point because I pretty much know about as much about the avant-garde as anybody who goes onto Wikipedia. You can probably find out just as much as I could tell you more. So I really couldn't tell you. I really couldn't answer that question. Partly because I'm not enough of an authority on the avant-garde or on critical theory to tell you.
Do you consider when I see your plays, when I see your pieces, I consider them before the form, or in front of the form, at least as a spectator. And I'm wondering, is that a consideration with you? Do you consider the traditional form of theater when creating something like the Myopia or Jonas, and then proceed, or do you just attempt creating without consideration of what exists?
What exists meaning what?
Meaning the tradition of the theater. What would be a normal play, or considered a normal play? Or when your most recent play, well, not the most recent, but your recent play, Playwrights Horizons,
yes,
was very, very much conscious of the history of the theater.
yes.
And so I'm just, in that term of the avant-garde, is that a consideration?
Well, it seems to me there are so many traditions in the theater. I mean, there's really only one tradition in the theater, which is you put together some kind of play and then you do it. That's the tradition I know. constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody, I think, can create in a vacuum. You know, you always are responding to something internally or externally. But in terms of traditional, that becomes so complex and more than I'm equipped to talk about, because I don't know enough about how to really talk about the tradition of the theater, or the tradition, you know, since there are so many strands operating simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. I think so much about, I've thought a lot about your piece, Jonas, since I saw it this summer. And you could probably tell everyone about it who didn't get the chance to see it better than I can. But it was generated, yes, out of your work in The Royal Family on Broadway. And I think that's something that's very interesting to me in terms of this question of tradition and form and avant-garde, you know, piece, you know, that genesis, if you could talk about that a bit.
About the piece itself?
Yeah, and how you came up with it, and that process of creating that.
Well, for that specific piece, I mean, you know, I was in this revival of The Royal Family, and I played the butler. And I didn't have a lot of lines. I did have a number of things to do on the stage, like carrying trays in and out and hanging up clothes and things like that. It was a terrific experience. It was a lot of fun. And I thought, you know, I didn't want to just sit backstage. I don't know how people read backstage. It seems impossible. It's so dark. And if you sit in the dressing room, there's always somebody talking. And if they're not, you probably fall asleep anyway, or whatever. And people do crossword puzzles, which I don't have any interest in. So what I think I would do for this particular piece is I would create a score for where I was every moment that I was not on stage. And I would sit there and I would replay it in my mind every time. So I was really on the whole show. I was crazy. I had to get ready for my entrance. It wasn't like that. It wasn't timed. It was a strange way. And we all took intermissions and all that. But I relived what I had planned out. Now that all evolved in the course of rehearsal, and it constantly changed even in the course of the rehearsal and the production. My imagined offstage life changed, and in the course of that, I think I had thought that my character might write something, and then that changed, and he became somebody who was imagining somebody writing something. It all went like that. And so at a certain point, I had some free time because my partner, who's a painter, had an exhibition and I was minding the gallery. And so I just began writing the idea behind all this. And I created a piece called Jonas, because my character was Joe in the play. And the play, it's a monologue, it's a 10-page monologue. And it pretty much describes the inner and outer state of the actor during the course of the play. The life of the character as imagined, the life of the character is imagining. And then there's an extended monologue within that of the character that I played as I imagined him speaking. So that's pretty much how I did it.
And you do that for every play you're in, right?
No. I was in Adam Rapp's play a season ago, The Metal Children, and in that, I had two great parts, and they cut one part after the workshop. I had a wonderful part. Anyway, but I did they did the play anyway. And in that play, I was only in the first and in the last scene. And there's a year between them. I was not going to spend the whole time, imagining what happened in the year.
It could have been a 2-act play.
Demented. And then, so I didn't do that. But then he threw me on as this priest that had no lines, sitting to the right of the audience. They really couldn't even see me. And what was interesting about that, though, was that's one of the great acting opportunities, because then I had to just watch all the characters and listen to them. All you're doing is thinking. And if you stay in the scene and you have no lines and nobody can see you, all you do is just give yourself like a little play that you're, what is she really saying? Oh, I see what she's revealing. She's pregnant. Or, you know, that kind of stuff. And you figure it out bit by bit. So that was kind of like it was a long scene. And the leading role was played by Billy Crudup. He had a long speech. And I just kind of tracked his speech as I felt this character would. So that was kind of the only kind of off-script thing I did. The rest of it was like, I did read a book in between the first and last scene of the play. So, you know, and it was a relatively quiet dressing room, so I was able to do that.
Homage is something I'm really interested in lately. And I was thinking about the myopia, which is which I don't know if it's it may be my favorite play you've written. Can't decide. But I love that play, and I wonder if you think of that play as an homage to people like Carol Channing, and I mean who are in the play, who are characters. But when we were talking about Mary Martin, I was thinking so much about Carol Channing and the myopia and Gertrude Stein and all those people.
Sure. Well, like I said, that's why I gave you the little bit of the introduction that I did, because all those things have found their way into my work, and all the things that I listened to and loved when I was young still have some, you know, meaning to me. I didn't listen to Carol Channing at great length, but I did like it. How can you know? She's great. She's absolutely terrific, and her voice is pretty easy to reproduce. That's the reason I chose her. She was kind of the right person. But I did see her actually in a play years ago. I was usher when I was in high school at the Shubert Theater in Century City. This theater doesn't exist anymore. It's not even an old theater, and they destroyed it. That's kind of the way Los Angeles is. And she came through with a show called Lorelei, which was a revision of, it was a remake of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And
without the other part?
No, instead of playing the part that she originally played, she played it as a memory. So she was just basically doing the same show, and then she just walked back into it. She happened to look very good still, so it all worked out fine, but she must have been at least 60 or so when she was playing that 20-year-old girl. But she was so delightful anyway, it didn't really matter. And so her voice did stick with me. But all those things, they're just little bits and pieces that fell into that particular play. The musicals, the little bit that I knew of Gertrude Stein, the little bit I knew of Aristotle, and then some of the memories of reel-to-reel tape recorders, and things like that, found their way into that play. I don't know, but as a homage, I just put in the things that I remembered and that I liked, and that I either loved and or hated in a kind of a loving way.
And is it about things, it's similar with Jonas, just hearing you talk about it, that you allowed your thoughts to come into plays and things that you're thinking about, and it's so funny, well not funny, but interesting that Gertrude Stein in the first piece, the piece of hers that you performed, she talks about thinking being the only thing that happens on stage, right? That's the event, is the thinking in the theater.
Gertrude Stein said that?
Isn't it? Isn't that what she says?
Thinking?
The thinking is what happens in the theater, is what Gertrude Stein said. Right, Linda?
No. I think she just said, with Stein it was more that the scene is depicted on the stage is more often than not, one might say, there's always in syncopated time in relation to the emotion of anybody in the audience. She's talking about a syncopated experience. You asked before about traditional plays. For me, I guess, if I had to say what a traditional play is, it's the kind of play I grew up acting in when I was in high school, you know, before I found other plays. But even those plays, when you think about The Matchmaker, I mean, how many plays, you know, before that people come out and start talking to the audience about money is like manure. I mean, you know, they're kind of unusual in that sense. And I feel very much in that kind of tradition. But I do think I'll write a traditional play, and then something else happens. I was going to write a play about Aristotle and his teacher Plato arguing about poetry, and then I just turned into using the the poetics as a lecture, as a performance. I don't know, I always think about different kinds of plays. But I have no conscious intention of making a homage. Just, I don't know, kind of what comes out of it.
Does poetry influence you a lot in terms of, you just mentioned Aristotle?
No, the only reason I did that Aristotle piece was I was teaching at the dramatic writing program at NYU. I was so desperate for dough. And so I said, do you have anything I could teach? And I taught a class. I basically taught what I did, which was I had playwrights write a short play, find actors, bring in their own furniture, and stage it, and light it, do everything they could. That's what I used to do. That's how I started. I just found places to stage plays, and I paid the actors with the money I made as a waiter. And so they did, and they loved it, because they had not been doing any of their plays. All they'd been doing was reading them at a table, and they were so bored. I think to some extent. And so they were so happy to put them on the stage. So then they asked me to come back and teach the craft of playwriting, which I knew nothing of, and I still to this day know nothing of. And so I thought, okay, I better read something on, I better read up about playwriting. So I thought, oh, read the poetics. I mean, wasn't that something about playwriting? So I read that, and that's of course, I never taught it. I wasn't that dumb. But that's where I got the idea that there could be a play about Plato and Aristotle. But I never really wrote the play because I can't write a play like that. What I became most interested in was the lecture as a piece of theater. And because I'd already done the Gertrude Stein lecture periodically, I thought the poetics could be a lecture and could be a piece of theater. And I wound into it the writings of Gerald Else that discuss Aristotle's defense of poetry in relation to the attack on poetry by Plato. So that's how that came about. It was not from a particular interest or knowledge of poetry.
How do you decide how to perform these lectures? I mean, watching you perform in both Myopia and Jonas, you in a chair or on a stool. You're on a stool in Jonas, right?
Yes. And I found that on the street too. Yeah.
But they both create. I mean, Jonas especially was one of the most visual pieces I've ever seen, just in terms of my own visuals of that you were painting. You know, it was such a specific visual landscape that was being created. How do you develop? I mean, how much did Brian, Murtis, or Jack Cummings? They both directed those two respective pieces.
Well, Jonas was not. That was kind of self-directed. Yeah. But then with the Myopia was self-directed to a great extent. Brian helped shape it, as did Melanie. But basically, what I do when I'm doing a solo piece, and even with the Stein lecture, and the argument and Jonas and the Myopia, so I sit in my living room, or I walk around the living room, and I say the lines, and I learn the lines, and then I try to find, if necessary, some way to make it clear through a physical vocabulary. In the argument, this whole kind of kinetic vocabulary developed, just in terms of my only intention was to try to make the poetics as clear as possible, with the enhancement of Gerald Else's notes about the poetics and about Plato, from his long commentary of the argument, to make it as clear as possible to the audience, to make it as available and as accessible to the audience. Because the poetics, when I read it in college for the survey course, was you could have been reading a cereal box backwards. I had no idea what it meant, really. And so, but when I did begin to understand, I thought it was really exciting and interesting, and I wanted to share it. And the same with the Stein lecture. And the thing about the Stein lecture, it's true of the argument also of poetics. The more I do them, I just came back from doing them out in Los Angeles. The more I do them, the more I learn about them, and the clearer I can make them, and the more I try to make them clear to the audience what they're getting at, what I think Stein is really trying to get at. So the whole thing in my living room when I'm working is just to make them as clear as possible. And the same was true with Jonas. It was simply a matter of trying to make clear through a physical vocabulary, in that case only my arms and my hands, and the shifts in my head and my voice, who was talking, what, which part of the internal or external is being told, and to make that as clear as possible. And that's all that I tried to do. And in the myopia, it was the same thing. It was to make as clear as possible who was talking, and to create a little bit of kinetic movement so that it wasn't completely stationary. And that's all I tried to do. The thing also about the myopia, when I wrote the myopia, did you see the myopia? Well, if you saw it, the only thing I tried to do with the myopia, see, I was going to write a regular play there too, like regular actors and people coming in and out, there being a giant hand and all that stuff. And then I did a reading of it at the public, and I did through the stage directions of the smoke-filled room. And I did it, and I played all the characters. I didn't want to kind of find anybody to do it. And it kind of took off from there. Because then, actually, I did a reading at the workshop of the whole first act, only the first act. And I played all the senators in the smoke-filled room. And I thought it was kind of fun. And so the rest of it got jettisoned. I decided to get rid of the idea of having a lot of people play all those senators. I would just do it myself. And so I decided to do it in a chair. and that was in concert, which was what was, for me, an ongoing aesthetic idea that was developing, which I've always felt, and partly I've always felt because I grew up listening to these albums with nothing to look at, but only anything to hear. And in fact, when I said my father recorded these on the tape recorders, we didn't have the liner notes. I didn't know what was going on. I just imagined the story from what I heard. That all that you need, and this is from Peter Brook, all that you need for an act of theater to be engaged is someone to do something and someone to watch it. You don't need any kind of set. You don't need any kind of lighting even. You just need somebody to do and somebody to watch or someone to listen. And so that kind of took off with the myopia, and I think it certainly has influenced Jonas. There's no great physical activity there, and it's true of the argument in a way too. There's nothing really. I do it on a bare stage, often without any change in light. It's just the text. And it's like those recordings. People talking interested me so much. That's why when I was young, I can't remember I mentioned this one. I recorded The Wizard of Oz, I recorded Guys and Dolls, and I recorded Born Yesterday with Judy Holliday, which had no singing, but I just loved to listen to it because the voices were so clear to me. So that's how that developed.
So when you go back to working on, when you go and work on something like an Adam Rapp play or The Royal Family, how do you find your focus shifts? Your awareness, your work, your process shifts from working on something like the argument.
Well, if you're in a solo piece, you're responsible for keeping the ball in the air the whole time, obviously. That's what I'm saying. When you're in a play with other people, then you just do the play with the other people. I mean, then it's a matter of like tennis. You're not juggling as much as you're playing tennis, and. So whether it's a play I've written that there are other characters in, or whether it's a play that somebody else has written, it's like, Tom and I were in Orlando, we were switching parts a lot and all that, but it was just like kind of like, an ensemble activity. We're all there saying lines. Yeah. In that case, we were saying narrative too. It's just like an irregular play. That's all it is. The process is the same in my work or in anybody else's work, and to some extent it's true in the solo pieces. You decide what your actions are. So obviously in concert with the director and the playwright, if there's a playwright, not a revival. You decide what your actions are, your obstacles, states of being, emotional states, physical states, and you go from there, and then you learn your lines and everything. You're blocking.
I read a review of a show of yours. I was reading all your old notices in preparation for tonight. someone once said that Meta should be your middle name. Do you think that's true? And can you talk about your middle name, Meta? David Meta Greenspan?
I don't know. You know, somebody once told me there was used the word meta-theatrical. I didn't even know what it meant when you said it. It was only a few years ago, too. But now I'm kind of taken to it. I think it's an awfully nice word. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I don't know, because I've lived such an enclosed life. You know, all I know about is the theater, and I see it in that kind of mirror. I don't know. I really don't know. I think the things that I write, sometimes even the way I approach just acting, is in a kind of a playful way. And there's something inherently playful about a self-consciousness about the theater, and viewing it through that lens. But I don't know. That play, I did a version of it by Jose Rivera Sueño, Life is a Dream. I don't know, Life is a Theater. There are relationships, there's artifice, there's reality, there's disguise, things are revealed. That happens in plays and it happens in life. So for me, it's just been a convenient lens to view the relationships I know. So
I'm going to open up the floor for questions from you guys now, and I will also continue to ask questions and or tell you when you're being rude or inappropriate to David.
that would not be possible.
That play you did with Jonas, where you played all the characters,
The Patsy.
was that fun?
Oh, it was a blast.
You were incredible. I thought, oh, he's going to play all the characters. Should I go? And then I went. And so you were like crying as the mother. I mean, you just were so full, and it was so entertaining. You just went. There was no transitions. It was.
I love that. Jack had seen the Myopia, where I played all the different characters, and he proposed that we do a play that I played all the roles in, like a regular play. But he didn't want me to sit in a chair or anything. I said, that's fine. And he proposed a play which I just did not think I could pull off. And so he said, well, do you want to look around for another one? And I said, sure. And so we batted around some ideas, and I remembered this piece, The Patsy, which was I knew from a silent film, starring Marion Davies. Actually, Marion Davies and Marie Dreisler. And it's a sweet little play, it's like a living room romantic comedy, but I thought it had a little sting to it. Some of them are so vicious to the others. And,
Especially the way you played it.
Yeah.
Grace.
And they're all it's kind of an interesting American family. A typical American family that yell at each other and somebody's not loved enough. And I just thought it was such a sweet little play that we decided to do it. I think we had a terrific time doing it.
The first time I saw you, it was at a play downtown, and you were doing a show about being yourself, I guess. I was just realizing, oh, it's him. He's trying to write, but he can't, so he's masturbating. You know that play.
2 Samuel 11?
Yeah. But I didn't act in it. Ron Bagden played that part. He played the writer, and Mary Schultz played Bathsheba.
Because later, when I started writing, I thought, David, that was autobiographical, because you do find thousands of things to do when it comes time to write.
Okay.
But I was also thinking...
Outed!
When you were talking earlier, it sounded like maybe your dad was gay or something, and he was recording all those musicals.
I think he recorded them as much for my mother as anything else. But he liked them too.
He sounded like a sweet man.
Yeah. He's still around. I just saw him.
Craig?
Yeah, I had a question. It's funny that you do these plays that are, so stationary as you say, because what I'm always struck by when I see you work is the physical score. And it seems so incredibly precise and graceful. And it was incredible to hear that you were in the 4th row of the chorus, because you couldn't dance, because I assumed you've had all this dance training and,
I did study ballet. I tried, well, of course, they're always doing anything goes when you're in high school. So I did, my father, very nicely, built a platform for me in the backyard so I could practice taps. Tapping in the backyard of this house. But I could never get it down properly. And I took ballet in college, but I never could move across the floor. I just learned how to stretch and all that stuff. But even in the solo plays, when they're, in fact, I'm going to be doing the myopia again in a week and a half or so. So I'm practicing it at home at Bryn Mawr, and every movement of my upper body, or even the way I open or stretch, close my legs, is all repeated. It's all choreographed, and it's all for kinesthetic effect. So even in those things where I don't seemingly move very much, the movement in it is repeated. I don't improvise, and it's all. I think it's all part of it. It's just that it's restricted in certain cases. In the patio, there was no restriction of movement. I was all over the stage in that one.
But that was also carefully choreographed too?
The Patsy?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Jack and I, we staged the piece in about 10 days, and it was an hour 20 straight of moving all over the set as the 8 characters. So that was completely blocked and choreographed.
Do you, when you do those solo pieces, do you at home, do you just do it through kinesthetic, like physical memory, or do you tape yourself ever?
Oh no, I don't tape myself.
No?
No, I just practice it. With Jonas, because the lines were so hard, I had to practice it every day during the course of the run, even the days when I was off, and every day before I went to the theater. And so just the repetition of the words, that was one of the most amazing about that piece, was just the words, because there was so many minor changes in phrase. You get lost there. Luckily, I never did. But also, in any of those pieces, whenever there's any movement, all of you as actors know this, that any physical choreography, any movement, begins to coordinate with the text. So one of the ways sometimes young people ask me, how do you remember all those lines? Well, part of it is you remember your blocking. Remember you're blocking your line. First of all, there's muscle memory in the mouth, but then also the muscle memory in the physical score coordinates with the text, so it helps you remember the words. Sometimes you say, oh my God, if I forget a movement, or a shift of my head, I might go, into Pittsburgh or something. So, but that doesn't happen. I'm usually pretty able to pull myself out of it.
I was actually sort of following up with this earlier question. I'm interested to hear more about the work you did with the choreographer. What kind of dance it was, what kind of how you described the writing that you did to match it, what it sort of looked like, and what you learned from doing it.
Well, when I first, like I said, I was writing these stream of consciousness monologues, and they were all about sexuality and physical desire. And they were all in kind of abstract ways that people wouldn't necessarily know what was going on. In some of the pieces, like I wrote a piece called "Boys Who Are Boys," and it was a long monologue. There were phrases like "boys who are boys are like boys who are like boys who like boys. Do they like boys? They like boys." It would just go on like that, and it would culminate in a rather dramatic finish. With the choreographers, and I work with a number of them, but one particular that I work with, they were just abstract ideas. It all, frankly, was about my being in love with him and him having all these girlfriends, but it was done in these abstract ways that nobody would really know what was going on. Supposedly, we didn't know what was going on. It was the East Village. It was 13 between A and B. It was that kind of life, and at that time, and so I would just be speaking while people were moving around. I would do a little movement. I wasn't a dancer, so they had all these modern dance choreography, which I really couldn't do. But I think my movement was probably as interesting as they were doing. It was just not choreographed. He didn't choreograph my movement. I pretty much developed my own sense of movement in it, and it coordinated with my text and was played in opposition to the choreographic sections going on around me. Sometimes there was no speech, there was just movement, but more often than not, I was like the score that dances were played off against. But I took a certain amount of focus and made a certain amount of impression, just because I wasn't off to the side, I was often in the midst of the action. Does that help you at all?
Yeah. What did you learn from it?
What I learned from it? I don't know. I don't know, it's just part of the evolution of writing it. I wrote from my feelings, I can tell you that much. I certainly wrote from my feelings, and it connected me to a lot of rage and, kind of ecstasy and fear and all the things that I was experiencing at that time. And they just found expression, again, in this rather abstract, almost stream of consciousness kind of way. But it wasn't a stream of consciousness like you would see with Joyce, where he has characters. I was the only character. It was just my stream of consciousness, but I just liked the way it sounded, so I said it. And people seem to find it kind of interesting.
I'm going to take a little left turn. How does the audience matter to you differently as a writer than an actor, or does it? Who you're playing to? That consideration?
No, there's no difference really. I think if it's a play of mine, unless they've just stumbled into it by chance or error, I think people who come and see a play of mine have some interest in what I've done, or they've heard something. So hopefully they're the right audience. With somebody else's play, the audience might be very different. They might just be a different kind of audience. That depends on the theater you're performing in. I was performing in Terrence McNally's play Some Men. It was the second stage, and they have an audience. It might not be the exact same audience that comes to the workshop. Maybe some of the same people, and I go to all these theaters, or some of the theater, but I think a lot of these people go to the theater, go to a lot of different theaters. They go to the Public, they go to Playwrights Horizon, so.
You see everything.
No, I wish I did. I wish I had more money. I would. I would see everything. There's things I don't get to see. And if I'm working, it's hard to see sometimes. But I do try to see as much as I can.
You were just saying that you were going to see, we were talking about Queen of the Mist, this musical, that you were going to see it again. Do you often see things more than once?
No. Time doesn't permit that.
Yeah.
But this is okay. So I'm curious to see.
Because I sometimes feel like I need to see the myopia 4 or 5 times before I actually begin to start understanding everything that's going on.
I hope that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It's a great thing. I love that. But same with Jonas. I could just see it again. It's like like a painting, which I think is unique about your work. That if I see, like, I don't just say, oh, I've seen that painting, I don't need to see it anymore. Whereas people say, oh no, I saw Follies, I don't need to go see it again. Whereas I could have seen, I did see the Patsy a few times, but I could have seen it, several. And so I wonder if do you find that to be true when you see other performers? Or
That what?
As a viewer, that you want to take it in more than once, or do you hope that people will take your work in more than once?
Well, yeah, I love repeat customers, that's nice. But, sure. But I think all of us know who either go to the theater or work in the theater. In fact, there's a line in Gertrude Stein's lecture on the theater. She says a child's experience of the theater is 2 things. One, which is in a way like a circus, that is the general movement and light and air, which any theater has, and a great deal of glitter in the light, and a great deal of height in the air, and then there are moments. A very, very few moments, but still moments. One must be pretty far advanced in adolescence before one realizes a whole play. Up to the time of adolescence, when one does really live in a whole play, so forth and so on. Well, I was thinking about that because I was just performing the piece, that she's a little contradictory, because then she says she really can't follow the whole play anyway. How much has she realized? And then she talks about liking melodrama because the characters have nothing to say that's any important, so you don't have to realize what they say. Which I think is very astute. That's what the pleasures of melodramas. You know who the characters are immediately. You don't have to pay attention to what they say. You know all you have to do is watch how they move. But you know, I can think of plays I've seen very recently, and I'm well past adolescence, and I can't remember the whole thing. You're left with impressions. I remember seeing this, what I thought was a remarkable production of Strange Interlude a number of years ago with Glenda Jackson.
Yes.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
And I just remember a couple. I remember how great it was, and I remember a couple of moments of her turning around, and I remember her in sunglasses. I don't remember the whole thing. Some things make such an impression, but you can't remember the whole thing. So I don't think anybody realizes an entire play. You may realize it a bit as it's going on, but I saw something last night. I'm sure I missed things because you're looking one place and something is going on somewhere else. That's just the nature of the theater. Hopefully it's the director's job and the actors and the designers to coordinate it as best as possible for the audience to best follow what the action of the play is, or in the case if it's not action, what you want them to see. But yeah, it's very, you never get the whole play, I don't think.
Yeah. You guys jump in, yeah, please.
I have a follow-up question to Nick's question about audiences, and it also plays into the idea of what is avant-garde theater. But I recently was having a conversation where my friends and I were trying to determine what makes theater, experimental theater, and performance art. And ultimately we thought it was...
between the two, or?
Or yeah, between all three.
Theater?
Experimental theater and performance art. What defines those as different entities?
Mm-hmm.
And we came to the conclusion that it was context, history, and audience. And I wonder if you feel that there is a chasm between the audience members who go to see your plays and the plays that you act in, and if you play into a different vocabulary that those audience members have.
See if I can ask you, because the public asked you to repeat it. But tell me more about what you said. What did you come to a conclusion?
That the difference lies in the context, the history, and the audience members at each of those.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it means that people that come to performance art are coming with a history of performance art from visual art, and not out of theater. And I'm wondering if you feel that there is a different type of audience member at your plays.
Then say a
At
play on Broadway or a play
yeah.
at MTC or...
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I see some of the same people afterwards who come to see my play that I was in, I don't know, Adam's play or Michi Baral's play or Orlando at CSC. I see some of the same people. And if you're doing my play at Playwrights Horizons or even Transport Group, I mean, it's not like it's, it's not like it's in some tunnel, so there's crossover, you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking, is if you feel that there is a bridge between the two, or if you feel like there is a distinct difference.
Specifically in my work.
Yeah.
No, I think, well, but say a lot of the things I'm involved in, I would say most of the things I'm involved in are things that people who see my work would see also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like I'm doing, Ringling Brothers, it might be a different audience,
Right.
There's some of this, it's in this, I think in a similar milieu. So I think there's pretty much, not the exact same people. It's like saying before, people who go to Playwrights Horizons might well go to the public theater, might well come here.
But they might
Or
not
wealthy.
well go to 13th between A and B to see the dance piece with the stream of conscious.
They might not, no,
Yeah.
they might not.
Or not even, go to a gallery in Chelsea to see what is deemed performance art and not
Right.
necessarily
They
theater.
They might or might not, depending, they might or might not, yeah. But certainly in the places that most of my work most of where I work, some of the same people could well see it.
Someone else over here, or else I'm going to just keep going. Yeah, Jess.
It seems like a lot of your inspiration comes from internal musings that you're having while performing, specifically when you're talking about Jonas. So I'm wondering, what do you get by sharing it, by taking it to that exterior place as opposed to living with it in your mind? And what do you want the audience to get from you sharing that kind of interior world in your plays?
Do you mean just Jonas specifically?
Well, in any of these ideas, I guess it's a difference of when you started reading the journal, for example. What is the impetus for getting it out there as opposed to just writing it down or just keeping it to yourself and saying, I'm an actor, I do someone else's words? When does it leap into, I have to stop saying someone else's words, I have to say it to them, and what do you want to get from that? And what do you want them to get from you?
I don't know. It's probably not any different than any other writer who wants to write, or has just an inclination to write. And then because I like to perform, I just thought I'll perform it. It was more like a passion, or more like a calling is the wrong word. It sounds so religious. An artistic inclination to want to perform, and then there was some idea that the way I'd written these monologues, and then maybe rewritten them a little bit as I thought about them, I thought they would be worth performing. What I want the audience to get, well, I don't know. It's hard to know. Mostly, I want them to be entertained. That's my main interest, is entertaining. I think of myself as an entertainer. I don't mean that just like in a club act or anything. Not that anything wrong with doing club acts, but just engaging an audience. You always want people to have a good time, I think. Whether the good time has serious or comedic impact. You want to make sure they get their money's worth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want.
Have you thought about doing a club act?
Well, there is the shower, that kind of thing. People dedicate so much time and energy just doing those things. I leave that to them.
You did study singing, though. I know you did.
Oh yeah, no, I sing in musicals occasionally, and I like to sing. Maybe I'll put something together at some point. I don't know. There are some people who do it so well. I'm not high on my agenda like that.
I'd buy a ticket to the Carlisle
Okay.
concert. Will you talk about Hairspray a little bit? Sorry, I'm just gonna, because that's like the most amazing track anyone on earth has ever covered.
No, what do you mean?
Didn't you cover both?
Oh, well, that's what they hire you for, but that's not what you do.
Oh,
I mean, first I thought, this is how stupid I am. I'll be covering Harvey and Dick Latessa. Wow. And then I look at Harvey and think, I'm not going to, she's supposed to be enormous. I had to say to the stage manager at one point, why am I even rehearsing this? What are you going to put me in? It's ridiculous. Oh my God! I went on once. I don't put it on my resume. I don't put it in my bio. It was just 10 months of, I was sitting in a dressing room for a long time, a cold dressing room, with either young people who have young things on their minds, with an old person who had very old things on their minds. And that's the one show I saw more than any other show in my life. It kind of like just froze on the retina. You don't have to do if you're an artist. And I watched it, and I watched it. I watched it in Seattle, and I watched it at the new 42nd Street Studios, and I watched it, and I watched it, and I watched it, and I watched it. It's a great show. I think we knew from the minute that show first was performed, the audience went ballistic. It just ran over them. And it only got better as they worked on it. But talk about what you remember. I remember running every night after Dick Latesse's last entrance, running for the bus that would take me down I ran across 52nd Street to that bus on 9th Avenue to go home. It was just it's just very hard. It's just very hard to sit in a dressing room for that long, for that many months. It's just, I mean, I bought a couch, but that's and I got a 401k.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm always thinking about anyway. But they were terrific performers. I mean, they're all and they've all done so well. You know, and Matt Morrison, who was such, I hardly knew the people well. You know, it was kind of like in the ante-room, you know, way on the top. But I did know him a little bit, and he's such a sweet guy, and he just took over for somebody, Matt Morrison, and look where he's gone. He's done so well, and they're talented, and all of them. So.
Who did you go on for?
I went on for Dick Latesse. No, I went on for Dick for one time.
Was that terrible? I mean, what's the big moment of going on after months?
Well, first of all, these are the days. I've got to get a better cell phone. But I still only have one of those cell phones that gives you call and you receive. That's about all my cell phone does. And in those days, it was so old, I just never kept it on much because nobody ever used it. So they called me, they left me a message at some point during the day that I was going to be going on. And I didn't check it, so because I didn't know nobody would call me. So then they get a call like at 4:30, you're going to go on. So I thought, oh, okay. So I jump roped, and then I went to you know, it all went fine, you know. I thought, the other nice thing was all the ensemble people are off stage, with you kind of see them in your peripheral vision, they're all smiling and all this stuff. And it went over like gangbusters, and they all were very happy, and it was fun. One night.
10 months.
Yeah, it was fine. It was all very exhilarating. Of course, if you're going to go on more than that, you need notes, you know, stuff